It being 7:30 p.m.
Right, if you can write that down, thank you.
I'm bringing the legislative session of Swarthmore Borough Council, Monday, July 19th, 2018, to order. Let me do a quick roll call here. We have everyone but Lauren and our mayor, Tim Harney. And also present are Jane Billings, Borough Manager, and Bob Borough Solicitor. All right, first item of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, June 11th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
Can I just point out that my name is spelled a couple different ways in there?
Yes, you
Didn't
may.
seem worth emailing, but.
You may.
Thank you.
And
That's the easy part of my name.
We will correct it however we feel like.
Jane may change it altogether.
Yeah.
Something new.
Promise we'll get that right.
All right. Any other discussion, comments, edits? If none, let's have a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of our June 11th, 2018 meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next item of business also has to do with meetings. And it appears, as of now, that we may not have a quorum for either of the usual dates on which we would have an August meeting. Remember, we decided to go with only one meeting in July and one meeting in August. If we were having two meetings in August, the first one, the work session, would be August 6th, and the second one, the legislative session, would be August 13th. And Jane or Elise did a poll, and it looks like we've only got 3 people for certain at each of those meetings. So there's nothing preventing us. Yes, sir.
I said I wasn't going to be able to be on the 13th, but now I can.
No, you
That
can't.
matters. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So that would be a quorum. The other thing we can do, and I don't think there's anything stopping us, and I'm sure the borough solicitor will correct me if I'm wrong, is change the date of the meeting just for August.
All you need to do is advertise it at least 24 hours in advance. So.
If we were to do it the following month, that third Monday, let's say August 20th, what do people think about that?
It's fine. Yeah.
That is normally the general government meeting. Are you willing to give that up?
We could always reschedule.
Please. I'm actually gonna, if you give me 1 minute, I know actually our video person probably prefers that date. I think you had a conflict on the 13th, a potential conflict.
20th is fine.
20th is good for you. Okay. So,
How's everybody else on the 20th? Let me check my own schedule before I speak too soon here. Let's see. Everyone else pretty good with the 20th, you think?
Yes. Not me.
Except for you, Betsy, you're the only one. We don't know about Lauren, but all right. Well, why don't we try that? Why don't we schedule the meeting for Monday, August 20th?
we will probably pay some bills. That's a little late for us to,
Right.
but we'll just ratify them at the meeting. So the report will look a little different.
Okay. Is everyone all right with that?
Yes.
Bob, do we need to memorialize that in any way other than advertise the change?
Just as long as that happens, that's fine.
Okay, great. All right, thanks everyone. That's all that I've got. Lauren's not here. Yes, go ahead.
You skip public comment.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Bob. Yes, public comment period. Is there anyone that would care to address council this evening? Thank you, Rick.
Sure. Good evening, Council. Rick Lee, President of the Park. I just wanted to thank everybody. We had a wonderful July 4th on Wednesday. I think the turnout was a little light being in the middle of the week, but we had a very successful day. No injuries, lots of fun, lots of water because of the hot day, and a good lesson. And we had a good turnout on the not only for the fire engine rise, but also the water fight down at Umoja Park. So I appreciate all of the support. Those of you that got a ride on the Antique for the parade, we only get that out a couple times a year, so that was a nice ride. And so we thank the borough residents and look forward to next year.
Thanks, Rick.
We did have an injury actually treated at the firehouse. Our public works, the cut finger from the public works department.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, sutured right down there in the firehouse.
Really?
No. It was
I thought you were-
bandaged at the firehouse.
Oh, bandage and fire. Okay.
And then he did, Brian did get 3 stitches on his hand. He came to work the next day, so thank you, Brian. And thank you, fire company, for taking care of it.
Yeah, that was great. That fire engine is always a lot of fun.
So day.
It might be a good fundraising tool too. As if, you know, if that were the only engine you had. Thanks, Rick. Anyone else care to address council? If not, I'll call the public comment period to a close. Lauren is not here to report on the Environment Committee. Anyone else on the committee have a report to make or anything to say?
I'll just say that I'm continuing to work with the EAC and a few steps to get the message out to use the recycling center. We put another article on the Facebook page and on our website. The Swarthmore didn't print the whole article, but they have a little blurb to go to the borough Facebook page to read about it. And again, just a little bit more information about all the variety of paper that can go to the recycling center. There's a new if you go to the recycling center, rather than the sign that used to say flattened cardboard, it now has an extensive list of things that can be recycled, including, I was coming to work a little early, and somebody said, I have all these books, what should I do with them? I said, put them in there, maybe your taxes will be lower next year, because we actually get paid for that. So, so it's still working to get the message out, and those organizations are working together, which is great, a few steps, and the EAC.
I have a question about that, if I may. Are we having the dumpster emptied more frequently? And that is a question from my husband.
Because it looked like we were not.
Because we've always taken our paper recycling there ourselves, just always have, and he tried to take it twice, and he says it's always filled to
Right,
overflowing.
so they had told us that it was not a problem. I think we probably need to call for more. In fact, you'll see on the recycling report, the numbers are down, and Elise called and they said we only had 1 pickup last month, which I don't think is entirely correct. So we will work on that. The other thing that we do, if it's overflowing, is we crush it down with the front end loader. With July 4th being a holiday and a little bit shortened hours, short crew last week, they may not have had time to do that. So I'll mention that to them because we don't want people to get frustrated and turned away.
Thank you. He never complains, so when he says something.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Mike, finance.
Yes. Financial report for June. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to take a look at it. In terms of how things are going, revenues are tracking basically as expected. Expenditures are a bit higher. One of the reasons is the one I've already mentioned before, which is we split our MMO payment, our minimum municipal obligation for the pension plans, into 2 payments as opposed to 1. So we did pay that early this year as opposed to budget, so that will wash itself out. The other thing is that we've had 2 officers go into the drop program, which is not totally unexpected, but it's not something that we budget for, and there is I think it works out to about $80,000 in terms of extra that went into the police. So it's about 2% of the budget. I know the chief is aware of it, so we're just paying attention to that part of the budget more closely than maybe we would have. And it's, again, it's unavoidable, but we don't budget for it because we don't know if people are going to go into the drop or not.
Or retire. It's actually, however they retire, whether they retire or retire into the drop, there's always a lump sum payment of unused vacation time, unused sick time, and any other compensated time off.
So anyway, at the end of June, the cash balance was $1,887,926. Are there any questions as it relates to the financial report for June?
I actually have a question. I had a chance to read it over in a little more detail this month, and I was just noticing that with respect to like phone and internet services, that it seems like we're paying Verizon for some things and Comcast for other things, and I felt like there were 4 or 5 different places where those charges were coming through. And I was just wondering if there's a reason that they're kept separate, or if anyone's looked into consolidating, and maybe if there's any discount to be had by getting everything under one carrier.
It is all under one, the internet and the phone is all under Comcast. I'm not sure which Verizon bill you're looking at, I'll have to look at that. Because we consolidated, we used to have Verizon, we consolidated, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was when Amanda was here, and she did consolidate that and save quite a bit of money by putting it together. So I'll look, I'm not sure what that Verizon bill
And
is.
it seems like there might have been some Firehouse stuff on there.
Are you guys still paying, well, we don't pay you a Verizon bill, though, so.
Yeah, we pay a Verizon bill for cable only. And we have the Comcast internet provided by Comcast.
Comcast provides the internet for free.
Yeah.
Verizon does not. We have franchise agreements with both, but only one provides that as part of their agreement with us.
Okay, no other questions. I'm going to move on to wire transfer, and transactions to ratify. So for the month of June, we had, I'd like to make a motion to approve wire transfers totaling $2,741.71 to pay off debts, and transaction to ratify of $186,078.75. That's a second quarter payment for the sewer to the Central Delaware County Authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the transactions or ratifying the transactions, which is the payment to the Central Delco Authority of $186,078.75, and wire transfers totaling $2,741.71. Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. The transactions are ratified, and the wire transfers as well.
Okay, now moving on, hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the bills for the month. So I'd like to make a motion to approve bills totaling $224,536.08 for the month of June.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving Mike's, or passing Mike's motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries.
The Finance Committee will not be meeting this month. That's all I have.
Great, thanks, Mike. Sarah, General Government?
So we did not meet last month, but I did want to note that we did some work on a rush approval for the permit for the vigil that was held here a week ago Saturday for Families Belong Together. The Interfaith Council of Delaware County chose Swarthmore as the place to host the Delaware County event, and things needed to come together quite quickly. So I just want to give many thanks to Jane, Anita Barrett from Swarthmore Town Center, and Chief Craig for making sure they had a safe and accommodating place to hold the vigil, which had about hundreds of attendees, according to the newspaper, and was one of the many that were held nationwide on that day. So thank you. We are going to be meeting next week here Monday, July 16th at 7:30, and that's all I have.
Thanks, Sarah. Planning and zoning? Sorry.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I want to go back to the bills, and I did want to point something else, I think it's important to get in a minute. There is a bill in the amount of $12,000 where the borough is actually paying back the liquid fuels fund. And I did want to point out, again, I think it's important that it be in the minutes. We are audited, the borough is audited, it's the liquid fuels funds, which is the money that comes to the borough for very specific purposes. It's all gas tax money that's distributed by the Commonwealth. We are audited on that by both PennDOT and by the Auditor General. And sometimes there are surprises, different auditors will look and do things differently. The good news is when there's something amiss in the liquid fuels and an expense that the auditors don't like, you're allowed to just pay the fund back out of the general fund, so the borough doesn't really lose any money. We retain control out of it. It's just more money in the liquid fuels fund. So this was an unusual one. They tagged our payment to Higgins, which are the people who fix our streetlights. And if you remember, we've been replacing a lot of LEDs, so the expenditure was a little higher than usual, and it was above the amount where you can go out not to bid. But we've always considered that a maintenance item and not and something that should have to be bid. But as usual, we lost that argument. And again, it's hard to make it too strenuously because you're not really losing any money. You're just putting more money back in the liquid fuels fund. And we always have plenty of things to spend. This year alone, we have a paving program that's $80,000 more than is in there. So I'd just like to point that out. I think we want to make sure it gets in the minutes that you all know about that. And I'll talk to the solicitor about what we might do about that in the future.
Jane, I have a general question for you. And I mean, your mention of the audit and the audit report brings it to mind. Are these reports generally available to the public if someone from the public would care?
Everything's available, of course, yes. I think we have I can't remember if we've posted these reports or not in the past. I feel like we have, looking at Elise because she does all the posting for us. I feel like there might actually be a section on the website where we post our usual audits. And these, of course, are done by outside agencies. They don't always come to us in electronic format, so sometimes we have to do that ourselves. Yeah, certainly if anybody asks, of course, it's available.
Okay, thanks. All right, Betsy, planning and zoning.
The Planning Commission had a really productive meeting last month. No, they really did. I think they're actually very, very close to bringing us something about doing this, what do we call it? Family?
Caregiver suite.
Caregiver suite.
Family/caregiver
suite. So they wanted to kind of, some of the nitty gritty, there were some size requirements in there, like the suite couldn't be more than 500 square feet, and they wanted to consider that a little more. But I have a feeling that this month they're going to send something up to us. So with respect to moving forward on the Aging in Place Task Force recommendation. And then with respect to the zoning hearing board, I just wanted to bring up, there's what seems like a pretty regular an application for a fence variance. However, it's on Crest Lane, which is a private road. So to my mind, what they're asking for pretty clearly is in violation of our zoning code because they're in between two roads there, between Crest and Cedar, and so they really don't have a backyard. The only thing is that this could open, if the zoning hearing board rules that because it's a private lane, they can extend the fence into the front yard, we could be setting up a precedent, which I don't think is a huge precedent since we have two private roads. But I wanted to bring it up since the Planning and Zoning Committee didn't meet this month. I wanted to bring it up to council just to say, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be straightforward. I think, Jane's ruling was straightforward. I think it's going to be straightforward with the zoning hearing board. But if we're concerned at all that this is going to set a precedence to allow people to have front yard fences, then I could, voice council's opinion to the zoning hearing board.
What was the borough zoning officer's decision on this?
The letter that I sent to the applicant said that the fence was in violation of the code because it did that violation where it turns at the front of the house. That was based on a decision that the Crest Lane was the front of the house and Cedar Lane was the back of the house. Which is an interpretation of the code. Unfortunately, Crest Lane, I totally agree with Betsy, it's a private lane, which seems like it should be a very different situation. Unfortunately, the code does not distinguish between private and public streets.
So they've already appealed it to the zoning hearing board?
Their appeal is coming up this month.
They asked for a variance.
Yeah.
And we were able to squeak it in for the July meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. There's really, I think it's not that big a deal unless the zoning hearing board were to rule differently because of it being a private lane, which could kind of put a crack in the wall that I think we've set up pretty firmly about fences staying in backyards. But I have a pretty strong feeling that it's going to be, I mean, when Jane explained it to me, I thought, I think I said to her, this seems pretty straightforward.
The other private lane is off of Riverview? Is that the other one?
Yes. No, not Riverview, I think Swarthmore Place.
Right. Okay, I did know that. Okay.
Well, any discussion of this idea? I mean, it doesn't, speaking personally, I guess, it doesn't seem to warrant conveying council's views, if council has a view, to the zoning hearing board, but I'm one person. Anyone have different thoughts?
I agree with you, and I'm not a fan of that generally.
The regulation.
No, the going to the
Oh, right,
hearing
right,
board
right, right.
on behalf of council to express a preference.
So there's no groundswell and maybe even no support, so I think we'll just let that go.
And then I guess that planning and zoning will be meeting this month. I don't know what the date is.
26th?
Is it 26th? Yeah, it sounds right. Fourth Thursday.
I think that's right.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Yep, 26th.
Okay. We are going to be.
Anything else, Betsy?
Nope.
Thank you. Public safety, Mary?
Thank you. Our committee did meet last month, and I think we spent the most time talking about our noise ordinances. There are a couple that sort of have interplay, and it was really just talking about how they work. And Chief Craig was here, and he addressed how they're enforced, because a couple of us have been contacted by people who live in the downtown and thought there was noise coming from Warehouse 3. And we wanted to just know what time the cutoff for noise was, and if you do get a complaint, how is that enforced? And we got some answers about that, and one of those suggestions was maybe looking into completely repealing this chapter 864 about sound amplifiers, and it's a very old ordinance. Yeah, that's older than me. And it really requires special equipment to measure the intensity of the sound, and I think it's something that we've really never done anything with here and don't have the financial wherewithal to even have the equipment to do something like that. So that wasn't something we were looking to do, and it probably still is not, but I thought I'd mention it. It's something that I made a note to talk to the solicitor about, and I have not done that, so he's hearing this for the first time himself, but I don't think the committee at that point had any appetite. It was just Ross and I that night. But I wanted to bring it up that was something. And other than that, I think that was the highlight. And I think we will meet this month, so that's Tuesday, July 24th at 7:30 p.m. in the hope that we will not meet in August.
And is that different than July 7th? For some reason I have July 7th.
Oh, that is right. I'm skipping over.
Yeah, it would be right after the council meeting, right? Third, would be the third.
Yes, so do we want to do that? Do you have
It's
any?
normally the third Tuesday.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I do have the date wrong.
That's okay. Either one's okay for me.
Okay, then we will meet in July on the correct date.
On the 17th?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Did you want an executive session?
And I did, and I wanted to mention that. Tonight I wanted to have an executive session to discuss the police chief job description. So,
That's fine.
yeah, mm-hmm.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mary?
No, that's it, thank you.
Great. Ross?
Okay, so we had a very busy Public Works Committee meeting, and my thanks to Lauren and Mary for that, and Jane and Cuzzy. We briefly discussed the street paving, which we're waiting to hear about, road markings for bike lanes, which are supposed to come in. We had ongoing discussion about a possible policy or process for alterations to public parks and property. And we considered for the second or third time a draft on that. We might tweak that a little bit. We'll look at that again at our next meeting. We're not bringing that up tonight. We did get a report from engineers about possible upgrades to the dirt wall in Central Park that is eroding, and which was a useful report, which talked about different ways to address that, and we agree that Jane and I probably would talk with the Centennial Foundation about that. So that's positive and moving forward. We had a visit from the new vice president of the college for facilities, and he has a very long, he said he has a very long title, so I'm not even going to try to say it, but he's the vice president for facilities, Andy Fike. It was very nice to have him introduced. He's coming from Temple University, and before that he was at another university, Ursinus, for a long time, and he's looking forward to, fixing up the facilities at the college, and interacted with us on the sewer lateral ordinance in a positive way, which was very helpful. We had a discussion of a proposal on a little free library. For those in the public who are not familiar with that, these are done fairly frequently. I think there's a website about them where private citizens can build one of these from a kit. And it's basically a post or a pole with a little house on top with a door, and you put books in it and stock it with books, and it's just a book sharing thing. And the Campbell family worked out a plan to collaborate with the Swarthmore Public Library to put one in the tot lot, and the committee reviewed that, and that was approved, and I got confirmation back from the Campbell family and Amber Osborne. So they're going to do that. So there's going to be a little free library for the kids to look at books in the top lot if they would like to. So that was a nice thing. And then we had some discussion about the train station. Jane, maybe you want to talk about the handicap issue there a little bit, or talk about what's coming up, or just a short report on that.
Well, sure. As most people know, the Aging in Place report identified the lack of accessibility under the railroad station as a major obstacle for seniors in town, and obviously there are many people besides seniors who find that troubling. So I started a conversation with SEPTA, I guess it was about a year ago, I'm not exactly sure, and they pretty much right away jumped on it and said that they would do the preliminary engineering with Swarthmore College, because the easiest underpass to renovate is the one that goes right to McGill Walks, of course, and it's closest to the inn, so it's going to impact the college. So they have now completed their 30% design, and it's really very nice. The college is extremely happy with what they would like to do. They like the look, they like the location. They feel it will be a big benefit to people staying at the inn to be able to get under the railroad tracks on a ramp. There is no funding for the rest of the design or for implementation. Their price tag right now is about $3.5 million for the project. I think that's just construction, but I could be wrong. So I'm having a meeting this week, just a phone meeting with SEPTA's grants people to talk a little bit about what possibilities might be for funding. And Tom Schaefer from the Delaware County Planning Department, who's a Swarthmore resident and is their transportation planner, is also very interested in the county helping with that effort. So that's kind of where we are right now. It's really, for me, probably sounds like forever, but it's been a year, but to have it go along that quickly, I think shows a lot of interest on SEPTA's part to make it happen. The vast majority of the land that would be on SEPTA property, so a little bit of Swarthmore College property at the end, but as I said, they've been involved in the process from the beginning, so they're pretty aware and very happy with where it is so far.
And I'd like to express appreciation to Jane for staying on top of this, because she's really taken initiative on it, and that's extremely helpful. And I talked with Linton Stables, we talked with Linton Stables. This is very important to the Senior Citizens Association and to the whole town. They did give us drawings. Those are in the office if people want to see the drawings. Basically, if you were in the college, you come down from Parish down that main walk, and normally you would just hit like a couple steps and then go down under the tunnel, and then when you got to the other side, you'd have to go up steps. So instead, when you come down, the college would level out the steps there, and then there would be a sideways ramp that goes sideways before a very long handicap ramp, and then you go under the tunnel, and then on the opposite side, the town side, there would be a long sideways handicap ramp, and that's all on SEPTA property. And they said that they would work on trying to improve underneath the tunnel, like, you know, that it looks kind of crummy right now, and they try and, if they ever get to it, okay, if we get the funding, so.
But the preliminary plan duplicates the existing stone facade, which is really nice.
Yes.
And they have said that we've had 2 meetings so far, and both meetings somebody has asked about maintenance, and they've said that the maintenance would be SEPTA's responsibility, not the borough's, which is nice.
Yes.
Because the Princeton Avenue tunnel is tricky.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you did find some grant funding, just not enough.
Right.
You found a couple $1 million worth of grant funding,
Yeah.
but not $3 million worth of grant.
Found 3 million, not 3.5.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not completely out of possibility at some point that we could make up the difference. So,
That's great.
in finding more grant funding. So we talked about that, and then the main thing that we talked about was the sewer lateral ordinance. So is it okay if I go with it?
Sure.
Okay. So beginning in January this year, we started working on a sewer lateral ordinance. I asked Jane at the beginning of the year, was there anything on the backlog of public works that needed to be addressed? And Jane explained that dealing with the sewer laterals was on the backlog. So in fact, the Borough Council had passed a resolution in 2013, 5 years ago, saying that basically the borough should do something about this. And Jane has educated me, and I've shared some of this with the committee, and it's actually a very active thing. So just, I don't know how many days ago, we got this report, just a few days ago, from engineers for the Delaware County Regional Water Authority. I just picked this up in my box this morning. So the bigger issue, which we talked about in committee, the very big picture issue is in 1938, all the sewage used to go right into Ridley Creek and Crum Creek, raw sewage into Ridley and Crum Creek, okay? It wasn't until 1951, okay, that we started building things so that the sewage would then go down to the Delaware River. So that amazed me in this history, that as of that time, we were just dumping all the raw sewage. By we, I mean Swarthmore, I mean the entire county was dumping everything in the creek. Bless you. And then in I guess somewhere between 51 and 70 and 71, the lines would come down to the Delaware River, and bless you. And mains were put in, 36-inch mains that basically went along the Delaware River. One went up towards the airport, and Philadelphia has a sewage treatment plant at the airport that we all know as we drive by it and smell it, okay? And then the main also goes down towards Chester, and there's a plant there that's owned by Delcora. And there is a station called the Central Station that, as it gravity feeds down to that, can choose to move it up to Philadelphia or down to the Delcora plant. That central station there can handle, as I recall, 40 million gallons a day. And when the weather is dry, it's like 7 to 10 million gallons a day. But in wet weather, it can go up over 40. And this becomes a problem. They end up having to try and send the stuff to Philadelphia. The whole region is feeding into Philadelphia. If there's an overflow, there are weirs, there are walls, and if it overflows, the raw sewage goes into the Delaware River. So the US EPA in the United States actually sued the Delcora years ago over this, and they resolved that lawsuit with a consent decree with the Justice Department entered in 2015, where these problems have to be addressed. And there are defined fines. They had to pay a $1,375,000 fine, and then they agreed to a set schedule of fines if these problems aren't addressed. And there's a long-term plan for Philadelphia, and the documents that I see here say long-term, the Philadelphia problem could cost $4.3 billion to fix, which would be shared by everybody contributing sewage into that plant. Okay? So that's a big ticket item. So the Water Authority would like to avoid getting more involved with that. What they would like to do is they would like to, number one, have municipalities pass sewer lateral ordinances that get the water out of the system. And that's a major goal that they state in all of this. They restate in here, towns need to, at a minimum, towns should require inspections of curbs and traps, address the issue of sewer ordinances, adopt time of sale inspections at the private levels. This is new, like since our last meetings, this is all new. This is like fresh and coming in. So it's saying, yes, what we've been working on since January is the right thing. But then they're also going to be coming to us because they're going to want us to pass a resolution in September authorizing them to make changes to the Crum Creek pumping station and the central station that allow them to divert some of this sewage away from Philadelphia and down to the regional plant where there's more capacity. And we're going to be dealing with a resolution to authorize them to go forward with that fix, that diversion fix. So we just got this, okay? And I have this, anybody who wants to see it, there are all sorts of, maps and color and whatever with everything. But the bottom line is they want to fix, they want to put in a line that actually would go by where Walmart is. In Eddystone. That would connect the Crum Creek line directly to go down south rather than the way it goes now, which is up to the central station and then pumped further up. So it involves changing the pumping plant and putting a line in. That's the big picture. We're not dealing with that tonight. I'm just letting everybody know that's coming up. So we've been working since January without knowing this was coming on the sewer lateral part of it. And we've had meetings every month about it. We had, Jane did a great job of going out to the neighboring municipalities and getting the ordinances that have been adopted. The committee reviewed those ordinances. We also had Dave Grady, the assistant manager from Nether Providence, come in and tell us about how they adopted one and how it's a good thing, and they showed us what they did in their ordinance. We had John Galligan, who's the president of the Plumbers Association, who are the people who actually do this, come in and talk to us to tell us what are the traps and pitfalls and problems. We went through multiple drafts. I talked with a realtor in town, and we had testimony from a realtor about how this would be a good thing and we should do it. And so we've gone through this process. So and we made some changes over the way to try and make it better. So we ended up with this version. I think you all got electronic copies of it. I have paper if anybody wants to look at it. Okay. And I don't know if I have enough. You might have to share. So let me just quickly go through and reiterate what this says. So there are two goals here. The first goal is to keep from putting clean water that doesn't need to be treated in the sewage plant into the sanitary system. Here in Swarthmore, we have a separate stormwater system that handles the natural rainwater. Those are separate pipes from the sewer system. But if you attach a downspout or something and put the clean water into the system, that contributes to this environmental problem where you can end up having raw sewage dumped into the Delaware River. So one goal is to avoid inflow. That's called inflow, where you actually attach things that put water into it. Infiltration is from underground, where the aquifers and the rainwater seep into cracked old pipes, and the fresh, clean water gets into the pipes from underground. That's called infiltration. They call it I&I, inflow and infiltration. So the main goal is to reduce that, and the way it's to be done is by having people inspect their laterals. The lateral is the pipe that goes from the house to the street sewer. Have them inspected at the time of sale. So if we go to sell our houses, just like we have to fix various other things in order to get a certificate of occupancy, we'd have to put a camera down the line and inspect the line to see if it's working to get the certificate of occupancy. So that's the main part of it. Another part of it is that we don't want sewage and various stuff that goes down the toilet and the washing machine and the sinks to be seeping out into the ground of our borough. Because if it can leak in one way, it can leak out the other way, and contaminants can get into the ground, and that's not good. So that's another goal. So originally when we drafted this, we did it by property. We said basically a property owner, particularly if you're a residential property owner, to get your certificate of occupancy, you have to do the inspection. And if it's not working, you have to get it repaired. We also said that for commercial buildings and institutional buildings, large buildings that might be multifamily buildings with 10 or more units in them, they have to do it. They typically don't sell. Institutional and commercial buildings typically don't sell, so point of sale is not a way to do that. So we have a provision here that basically every 15 years they have to inspect. And then we also changed the focus from property to building. Okay, so it's really if you have a building and it has a sewer lateral. So if you have an institution like the college that might have 170 sewer laterals from 65 buildings, they don't have to do them all in 1 year. They can do them basically 5 laterals per year at a time. So we have a provision about that in here. And we have definitions, and we also have provisions in here that say, number one, if you have a sewer lateral that's only 10 years old, you don't have to have it inspected. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 years, you don't have to have it inspected. If you flip the house, let's say you have a new line put in and then you sell the house within 10 years, you don't have to redo. And also, if you get it done and then it's sold again, and it meets the standards, you don't have to do it for another 5 years. So there's some protection here so you don't get hit multiple times. And also there's a provision that says it's not going to take effect until 90 days after we adopt the ordinance. So there'll be a time period, if it's adopted, where the public can have notice and become aware and not be caught unawares. And also if they happen to be selling their house, like the week we pass the ordinance, they're not going to get caught on this. So we have those provisions. So it's structured to deal with residential dwellings at time of sale, multifamily, commercial, and institutional buildings with this 15-year cycle. There are testing and inspection procedures. There's criteria for repair and replacement and standards. And then there's a certification given if it's done, inspected, and repaired, and certified. So that's what we went over. That's what we've been working on. The committee considered it. The committee voted unanimously to recommend it to council, and so we're here for that. So I'll make a motion, and then we can have discussion, and if there's a second. And so my motion is to adopt the sewer lateral ordinance in the draft that we've circulated.
To authorize for
I'm sorry,
advertising.
authorized for advertising, and we probably won't actually consider it until September. I don't know, we'll see.
Well, we'll advertise so that you have your choice.
Yeah.
We won't do it too early so that you're stuck.
Yes.
No problem.
Could I ask what the process is? This is the first time an ordinance has come up. Are there public hearings on this, or?
Depends on the type of ordinance. With zoning ordinances, you need to have a public hearing. It needs to be submitted to the planning commission and the county planning commission. But this is not a zoning ordinance, therefore all it needs is advertisement at least 7 days in advance and a vote at council meeting.
Okay, so I make that.
And the only thing I'd add is that mayors have the power to veto ordinances.
You can choose to have a public hearing on it if you want. What we usually say in the ad is something about, you're welcome to give your comments to council. So it doesn't, if you want to call it a public hearing, you can. I don't think it changes the advertising requirements though. As long as people know that they have a chance to come and chat about the ordinance. Another nice thing about doing it in September is it's nice to have 2 meetings, so at a work session, people come and comment, you have time to make changes, so it's another reason to maybe delay it.
Yes.
Is now the time to discuss some of,
We're going to do the motion, and if there's a
Let's have
second.
a motion to advertise.
Yes.
And then we'll have a session.
Second.
All right, now we'll discuss it. And the floor is open.
Okay.
I just have a question. So I'm hearing the things that the homeowners will have to do before they can sell their home. I'm assuming this is part of inspection and all of that. So how much more is this going to cost a homeowner to do just the camera inspection? Like, what are the figures on that? Is that part,
It's a couple $100.
so it's just a couple hundred, no matter what, to do the camera inspection? And then after that, it's just based on what they find, but there's a very strict criteria for what, not strict criteria, I mean, like, there's a spelled out criteria for what would constitute what homeowners would have to do to fix it.
Yes, I'll say that there was a model resolution that Delcora circulated, which we looked at. There were also resolutions adopted by other municipalities, including the Providence, that we looked at. Many of those resolutions deal with 3 different inspection methods, okay? So one method is you put a camera down and look to see if there are cracks or if you can see a percentage of roots coming in, if you can see active water flow coming in. Another method is what they call the smoke method, where you actually go to the beginning of the system and you put smoke in, and then you go outside, and over a period of time, if there are cracks, you see smoke actually come up out of the ground. Okay, so that gets every single little molecular crack. And then there's a dye method where you actually put dye in. Dye actually, you see it come out further down the line. That will go into the line even further down, the sewer line. Some ordinances require smoke or dye. We made a decision to say, at least at the first crack, it's only a camera. And then it's up to the discretion of the borough if follow-up is needed to confirm one way or another with smoke or with dye.
Now, if you look, I'm sorry, if you look at section 6,
Yeah.
it's lists the criteria for requiring repair or replacement, so that those would be the things.
Right, so that would be standard for everyone.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking if one inspector has, I mean, is there room for interpretation? I don't know, they just,
There, we had John Galligan come in and talk about this.
Yeah.
And each time a community passes one of these ordinances, they hold training sessions. And they held training sessions where they talk about differences between the different communities. It's basically the Plumbers Association that does it. Jane, do you want to speak to that at all? Or?
I think the short answer is that there probably are some interpretations. there is an organization that sets absolute standards for this, but that would have required a certified inspector, which would have cost more money. This ordinance allows some flexibility in terms of who does the inspections and what they find. But I think it would be, a sump pump going into the sanitary sewer is easy. A roof leader going into the sanitary sewer is easy. And you do these, when you look at these videos, and there will be judgment calls of whether a crack is a functional crack that's letting water, as Ross said, either out into the ground, which is bad, or water in, which is the major reason for the ordinances. So I don't think you could promise that there would be that there's not some judgment call when you're looking at these and what needs to be repaired. I don't know that I know how to fix that problem, but I think that's the honest answer.
Cuzzy is trained and certified?
Yes.
Yes, and he'll be involved in the process.
So I'm curious about why the committee chose to go with the CCTV, since that's the most invasive and expensive method. And in my experience, it can be much more than $200.
I would say that the committee's view was that was not the most expensive, that if you do smoke or
As opposed to
die,
what, smoke or die?
You're-
The smoke or die it's a complete waste of money. It doesn't teach you anything. So what smoke does is you throw a bomb in there and you wait to see smoke coming out of the ground. And if nothing happens, then that's true, that would be clear. But it's not in an old town where most people have very old pipes. You're going to see smoke coming out of the ground because it's just not that tight of a pipe. The other, where dye is put in the ground, that one you're actually putting dye around the outside and trying to get it in. Well, if that shows up into the pipe somewhere in the manhole or whatever, you're going to have to go back and televise both of those anyway. So to me, that was well, it wasn't just me, but when we talked to John about it, that was actually a double cost because those are not definitive. Those don't diagnose anything except a very gross problem.
And what do those cost?
I don't even know because I don't think they happen very often. So I don't
Yeah, they
know.
don't tell you where the problem is, they say.
But if there's no problem, they'll tell you there's no problem. So if it was $50 and then you had to pay to do CCTV, it saves someone spending $500 to do CCTV and find out that there's no problem.
I don't think anybody who is in this business would say that a dye test would prove that there's no problem. There's just not a way to put enough dye around a lateral to know that you've hit every spot where it might be going in. I don't think it would fulfill the goals of the committee.
and I'll say also that we did send this to John Galligan, who's the head of this Plumbers Association, who has the most experience in the area here, and also to Nether Providence. And Galligan said he thought this was the best ordinance that he's seen, that this is really good, and that he thanked our committee for preparing an ordinance that would not unduly burden people, would be practical, and could be implemented without unnecessary cost. He's the expert. It was his company that fixed the problem under the circle up here when we had a problem. So we listened to the experts on it.
Hey, Ross, what are some of the local, you mentioned Nether Providence, but what are some of the local municipalities that already have an ordinance in place? Nether Providence Township does, obviously.
Rose Valley, Edgemont.
Rose Valley does too.
Yes.
Rose Valley adopted super early, like 10 years ago.
When I went into Dave Welsh to his office, I said, this is what we're considering doing. 10 years ago, some of the realtors were against it then. He said, do this. You should do this. Back then, you would have been on the bleeding edge. Now you're following what everybody is doing. You need to do it. He said, you need to do this, and you need to get it, and you need to get in line with what the other places are. If you want, I can look up the other ordinances that we have.
Well, I'm just,
Can I ask a quick question while you're doing that? I mean, not that it shouldn't be repaired, but I'm just curious, like if the lateral is completely destroyed, like what, showing my naivete on this, what does it actually cost if there is a major problem? Are we talking
Well, it depends also.
I mean,
on-
roughly, I mean,
It's
it's
$10,000.
$10,000.
Yeah, it's a big deal. You have to
It's a lot.
excavate the deep excavation.
I mean, it has to be done, I mean, I'm just asking this.
Yes.
It's gonna.
There are multiple ways to do it. We had our house done, and we used the method where they they pull a pipe through, so you don't have to dig up a hole. We had a tree that we didn't want cut down. You can do it that way. You can dig a trench, you can put a new one in. There are a couple different methods that can be used.
I think, so what's that, somebody say 6 to 10? I think
Well,
that's
Spencer
fair.
said 6 to 12, I said
Yeah.
10.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
Yeah, 5 maybe, if you're lucky, but that would be on the very low end. You're right.
So we looked at, let me just answer Dave's question. We looked at Cheltenham, Concord, Derby, Edgemont, Milbourne, Nether Providence, O'Hara, Pendle, Rose Valley, Upland. Those were some that we looked at.
Those all have ordinances?
Yeah, we looked at their ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, most people have them now.
Okay.
yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, Betsy.
No, I mean, that was actually one of the questions that I had, with the idea of replace or repair. I was concerned because it doesn't seem like repair is defined, like in particular, section 6D, one of the conditions which would require replace or repair is if 25% or greater of the lateral is blocked by debris, including tree roots. Now, that's a really easy fix. They roto-root it, they cut the roots out. But I don't know if that would qualify under this as replace or repair, or like, we're talking $6,000 to $10,000, but if you just have a little break, they can dig that part out and replace that piece. You might be at $1,000 or $2,000.
I mean, I was just thinking max.
Right, well, so I was concerned in the ordinance that, especially with respect to that debris section, that there's no definition of replace or repair.
There are other ordinances that have a tremendous amount of regulatory detail in them. And they say, if you have any problem whatsoever, you have to fix it. And this is meant to get people looking at, we're in a situation now where the sewer laterals are not looked at all. And we had the borough engineer come into one of our meetings, and he put a nice photograph on the wall where he showed where you have the public sewer going down the middle of the street, like Park Avenue, and then you have the houses connecting. When you measure the distance, there's as much sewer pipe from the houses to the street as there is in the streets. And the borough inspects 1/7 of the borough every year for the street part. But we've got just as big an issue with the houses, and we've never required anything with respect to them. So the goal here is to get something in place which actually we were supposed to comply with some of these requirements, to move in a positive direction and to not micromanage it, but to allow the owners of the buildings and the professionals doing the inspection. They have to come eventually to CUSI, and they have to get the certificate. So there'll be some discussion about what was done. So there's going to be a certain amount of reasonableness in it.
I just wanted to back on one thing. There's no ordinance that I saw where it was smoke testing or dye testing or visual inspection with a camera. For instance, Nethers, which is a fairly standard one, it was prior to inspection, smoke testing or dye testing and visual inspection. And they actually are not doing the first part because, again, it was just an unnecessary step. So I don't know of one where those are allowed absent the camera.
We did get a comment from Dave Grady saying that if Swarthmore passes this, they might look at it and consider doing ours in place of the one they already
Do we have any data on what the efficacy of the CCTV is? Like what the error ratio is?
You know, all I'll say to that is that, you know, we have piles of reports and studies statewide, you know, involved with this. It's not a Swarthmore Borough issue. It's not a Delaware County issue. It's a It's a broad issue. If you would like to dig into those, there is no question that the EPA, the DOJ, the regional water authority, the sewer authorities all believe that this is the way that you do it. So we haven't gone back to reinvent the wheel on it. And all I can say is that everybody says this is the way to do it.
I have some other questions about the language. In section 6, section C, it says, there are cracks, so this is again criteria for repairing or replacing. And I'm concerned about, again, I feel like you were saying you're trying to make it general, to leave it to the discretion of the professional, the homeowner. But it says cracks, fractures, holes, deformities, collapse of the pipe, unconnected or displaced joints, missing section of pipe, observable inflow, infiltration. So I would find it hard to believe that there's a single sewer pipe in Swarthmore that doesn't have cracks, fractures, which aren't even cracks all the way through, or displaced joints, because if the roots are in there, the joint's displaced, even if it's fractional. So I feel like the way the language is now, you are requiring every homeowner in Swarthmore to repair or replace their sewer line upon selling the house.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to look at all these other dozens of ordinances. They actually include a lot more than this, okay? This is actually softer on the homeowner than these other ordinances. All of these things, cracks, fractures, holes, I could get out the Del Toro recommended resolution if you want to read that. We tried to include in it the minimum that's required without going overboard, and I'll just repeat again, John Galligan, who trains all the professionals on how to do this in all of these communities, said that this is the best that he's seen. I can't really offer you much more than that.
I guess I'm asking, you're saying more detail. I'm asking for definitions of these things, like, is it really any crack or any fracture? Is it a certain, what about a chip? Is it a certain depth, or does there need to be some kind of demonstration at that point of infiltration? The displaced joint thing, again, I feel like this is all encompassing. There is not going to be a single sewer line that is going to escape this. And if I were a plumber, I would absolutely be in total support of this, because it's doing a lot of work to plumbers. So, I question the credibility of that person as an expert. I think you need someone who has no chance of making money off of this if you're going to quote them as an expert. But
okay. Well, all I'll say is that the initiative for this isn't coming from the Plumbers Association. The initiative for this is coming from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, which there's a state law that requires that every municipality have a sewer plan that meets state standards. Because of the failure of some of these municipalities and their designated authority to meet those standards, there was a lawsuit resulting in a federal consent decree in October of 2015 with a $1,375,000 penalty for failure to comply with that requirement. And that consent decree, if the problem isn't solved, provides for fixed penalties. I can pull up and read it to you. The penalties range up to $8,000 per day, $8,000 per day for the entities that are violating this. And there is also the authority to order a moratorium on the connection to the system, so that the various communities, there could be a moratorium where you can't connect to your sewer to the system. So that's the main motivation for the regional water authorities, and they are unanimous in saying this needs to be done. And the language that they are saying we should do, this comes from them. This doesn't come from the Plumbers Association. This comes from them. And so this is a very, very reasonable thing to do. And basically, these municipalities realize if they don't take care of this, there's going to be a huge problem.
Right, I mean, I think that obviously the issue here is to, in the first place, detect any inflow or outflow. So you don't want clean water or non-wastewater flowing in, you don't want wastewater flowing out. And so the reason that you'd be looking for cracks or fractures or holes or whatever is because presumably there's got to be an ingress and an egress. And that would be through a crack, a fracture, a hole, etc. Not to mention a missing section of pipe. I mean, some of these things are going to be very obvious. I think probably what Betsy is wondering is, does every single crack in a pipe, is that going to lead to an inflow or an outflow? And, maybe that's where, I don't know whether any of these ordinances could be written. I'm not sure how you would standardize that, but I mean, I guess that's kind of where you're talking about some discretion or flexibility earlier. I mean, if there's...
I'm looking, because I have most of them here.
Yeah.
And I think the language in C could be clarified with something along the lines, this is another Providence. Visual inspection results, which is similar to ours, shows breaks, cracks, or missing sections that contribute observable clear flow or sediment into the sewage collection system. So I think this is a crafting problem where there's a misplaced or any
Something.
doesn't, you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
because
So
the
I
crack-
think
the
it's
crack-
the observable inflow or infiltration is there,
Right.
but the crack has to be showing that. So I
Right.
don't think this says that, but I think it could pretty easily.
And
Right?
you
So
could
it's
see
not
the-
the crack,
Right.
it's the crack to which you see water flowing in,
Exactly.
water flowing out.
So if there's a
So I-
very mild little
Right.
like hairline.
Which we have in all of our lines all the time,
Right.
and we don't repair them because they're not, eventually they might cause a problem.
Right.
Given the expense, you wouldn't do that. So I would think that, we could, maybe it's just,
How about, there are cracks, fractures, holes, deformities, collapses in the pipe, unconnected or displaced joints or missing sections of pipe that result in any observable inflow or infiltration.
I think you gotta do a little bit of a different tweak though, because there might be something that's missing there than any other
Or
observable
any
flow,
other,
but something
or any other
like that.
condition that results in observable.
Yeah, or any other.
Which still kind of, still kind of leaves you open if you're doing it in August and it hasn't rained for 3 weeks. There could be, a collapsed section of pipe and there would be no inflow, so.
But I think that you could, I think, CC my ladder when I bought it, when we bought the house. I know that some of the conditions could let water in. Even if it's been a dry season and water's not currently going in. A crack is not necessarily going to be, but something this big, on top of it is going to let water in around. So, it's going to be a judgment call.
Right.
I think that's what's concerning me is the idea of these judgment calls, because right now we're being very reasonable and kind, but what if whoever's in your job or Cuzzy's job is not reasonable and kind and goes, hey, that little line right there that's an inch long is a crack, and you have to repair your sewer line. I guess I'm just looking for some kind of protection that the judgment is fair to the homeowner and not requiring this level
Well,
of work for something that
Right.
isn't a problem.
But if the crack, but if we tie the crack or the deformity to an observable inflow or outflow, then I think you've got that. So if you have a crack and it's not causing an observable inflow or outflow, then presumably it would need to be repaired. I mean, that's.
I guess I'm just not, having
Yeah.
seen this, I
Right.
guess I'm just not
Right.
sure how
Right.
you would,
How
the
would you-
conditions would have to be
Just-
just right to
Some
observe
difference,
that.
yeah.
And so, in some ways, you're giving everybody an out, sort of, and on the other ways, you're giving an inspector the right to say, no, that's a crack, you have to fix it. And I'm just, I guess I just feel like it's too loose in both directions. And it just concerns me because it's an ordinance and we're talking about a significant amount of money. If repair, I mean, you know, a couple $100 is still a significant amount of money. If we were talking about that, I think I'd be less concerned about getting this language really clear, you know, about who gets to be the final arbiter of this. And maybe it's Cuzzy, I don't know, but then, you know, who takes over after Cuzzy? And I guess I would just feel a lot safer for all the homeowners if this was.
We could put in, since we know there's this organization, I mean, I think they are mostly plumbers, but you could have this, NASCO is the National Association of Sewer Service Companies. I think that's who Cuzzy is certified by. And you could have some sort of appeal process written in. I think you're getting at somebody who's completely unbiased making that final call, and I guess I'd have to do a little more investigation to make sure that that would be the organization, but you could build that in. Time is tough, you know, sometimes sales are pretty quick. But once the realtors know about it, I assume once a house goes on the market, they'll try and get this going pretty quickly. So if you do run into something, you could do that. Because there's no appeals process right now.
Because a smart homeowner putting a house on the market would do the inspection right away. So if there was a problem, in which case it would be great to have some kind of appeals or dispute process written into this. So you know, that would, you know, I think that would take care of some of my concerns with the, you know, like the idea of defining repair. And so that, one of the other concerns that I have with this idea of, in section B, pre-existing repairs. So we're putting this into effect now, but somebody who had their line repaired 2 years ago, who goes to sell their house, how do they document that they had their, I mean, it says, how do they prove, is a canceled check enough? Because, you know, 2 years ago, I didn't know I was going to have to prove that I'd already had this taken care of. I don't know. Section 3.
Section 3?
Section 3B, 2 and 3.
Gotcha.
I mean, maybe it's naive. I guess I assume that anybody who was having that level of expense to repair a sewer line probably would have kept some kind of
But it's
documentation.
not
of
really
it.
about a permit.
Yeah,
I mean, there should be a permit on file.
yeah.
Even if it's a repair?
If they're excavating, change maybe
Yeah.
a
Because,
permit.
I mean, I just
I
had
don't
my
know.
line, I just had my line camera and I
It
have no way to
says,
prove
I
it.
have
Permits shall be required before commencement of any work, including slip lining,
Yeah,
cured in place pipe bursting, and repairs to vents or cleanouts. That's in section 7B.
I know.
But if they
So-
just dig it up and replace a little section, is that always
Supposed to be a
permitted?
permit.
I think you need a permit for that.
Well, what if they say that my plumber did the work? Didn't they pull a permit?
If they don't have documentation, it's kind of on them.
I mean, we would work with anybody in that situation. I guess again, pulling this from other ordinances, I don't think that we thought that would be much of an issue. Hopefully it isn't. People have something. And I do think most, I mean, I don't know if people pull permits or not. I mean, if they call and
Well,
ask, it says right on our
And on the
website.
first one, it is building service by lateral installed within 10 years. And the installation of the lateral is not required.
Yeah. But if the whole lateral was replaced, wouldn't that be considered an installation?
Yep,
Yeah.
and there would be a permit.
Right.
That would,
Right. But a repair or a camera, there might not be a permit for it.
Well, it's
I don't know, we probably tell them to go back to the company, see what kind, I mean, when you do the televising, you know, they keep a report, because they.
I got a copy of mine.
Yeah, I think most people do, yeah.
Um,
I mean, I don't know, I totally understand what you're saying, I don't know how you would suggest changing the ordinance to deal with that particular issue.
Yeah, maybe just something in the first 5 years saying, I don't know, that there would, you know, that you'd work with the homeowner to document it or something. You know, I mean, again, you're saying it, but I feel like if there's no language in the ordinance.
That's the reason why we had Dave Grady, the assistant manager at Nether Providence, come in. He spoke with us for half an hour about the implementation. It's the same ordinance, and he reviewed it after we tweaked it or whatever, thought it was great. And he said basically there isn't really a problem.
So they haven't had any problems with people saying, I already have this done?
Yeah.
I think as far as putting something in there about we'll work with somebody about proving something, that doesn't seem like something that should be in the ordinance. Because that does lead to the slippery slope of people thinking erroneously that different people were treated differently under it.
So one of my other concerns, since we're talking about such a large amount of money, is what if someone can't pay to have their sewer line repaired? Can they not sell their home?
They have to negotiate with the buyer.
I mean, it would normally get paid out of the sale proceeds.
Yeah.
Right, but it has to be done before the sale takes place, right?
They would have to have the certificate before the sale takes place, yeah.
But they can negotiate in their contract.
That's what people usually do.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you can negotiate your contract if it hasn't happened yet.
Well, it happens all the time.
Contract
He-
sale
he-
predates
yeah,
the sale.
Between the buyer and
People
seller.
have a contract,
Yeah,
and
contract
they have an
sale.
inspection of their house, and it fails the radon test. And then they can go to the buyer and they say, well, you can, if you don't want to buy it, fine, but, we can't afford to do it, you're going to have to pay for it or whatever. And then they say, yeah, we want the house, and there's an adjustment.
Deduction off the purchase.
Yeah.
Right, but you don't have to get the occupancy certificate to have radon remediation done. Whereas in this case, you can't get the occupancy certificate until the repair is done. So it has to be paid for before the sale takes place. And I would be a pretty dumb buyer to hand you $6,000 to fix a pipe before I have possession of the property, right?
Well, it's the same with sidewalks, they have to be repaired before you sell. And, sometimes, deposit money might get applied to it.
But again,
Yeah, there's a risk to that, but
yeah, I mean, you don't get the deposit money.
you're not supposed to.
It's held in escrow. So again, so what if somebody, an elderly person or someone who's trying to do the right thing, can't pay their taxes anymore, is trying to sell their property, and they can't because the sewer line is broken and they don't have $8,000 to spend. I mean, I feel like, unless we have some kind of hardship clause in here or loans from the borough, I mean, I don't know what we can do, but what if it's an estate? What if it's an auction? I mean, you can't sell the house without the occupancy certificate, and you can't get that unless the sewer's fixed. And not everybody has that kind of money laying around. I mean, I guess you could, if you're not, what if you're totally maxed out? You can't take a second, if you take a second mortgage, it could affect the sale. I mean, there are going to be people in this community who are in a position to not be able to do these repairs. So what happens to them?
I'll just say that, like I said before, we looked at the ordinances from these other municipalities. We had Nether Providence come in. They didn't say that was a problem. They have experience with it, and they didn't say that was a problem.
How long has their ordinance been in effect?
Is it 10?
It feels like, I understand you have a concern, but this is not a Swarthmore unique problem, and this has been addressed by a lot of communities. And I understand you have these concerns, but there are other communities that have also faced this issue.
Well, maybe I want to be more careful with our residents than those other communities. And I'm envisioning situations where this causes real problems for people. And okay, maybe it hasn't happened, maybe nobody's talking about it, but it certainly could. I mean, I know I have at least one neighbor who, I don't know how she's continuing to pay her taxes. And, if she had to repair her sewer line, then what do? Abandon your house? Go into foreclosure? Just, wait until your taxes rack up and I hear what you're saying, like it hasn't happened, nobody said it's a problem,
But to me, it's a foreseeable problem, so why don't we try and do something about it? If we can make it a better ordinance, why not make it a better ordinance?
It's kind of, I'm thinking how we could improve it in the way you suggest. I'm not readily coming
I would
up
suggest you
with
talk
anything,
to
but-
a Realtor about it. I mean, this
Yeah.
is problems that Realtors face
Yeah, you would think so.
regularly with
Yeah.
property defects and there not being enough money
Right.
to pay for them prior to closing.
But-
I would think that there is a practical, I mean, often contractors do this work and get paid when the property sells. Realtors often have contractors if they are pulling in projects like that.
Yeah, I would guess, just hypothetically speaking, so let's say someone is selling a house in Swarthmore for $300,000. Probably this wouldn't stand in the way. I've got to believe that somehow the buyer and the seller would figure out a way to deal with this. I'm not a realtor and I don't have any experience with it, but
Do we have other things that would prohibit the issuance of the use and occupancy certificate that have this kind of price tag on them?
Well, sidewalks can get expensive, I mean, but I don't have the numbers on the table, but, and the other items that we inspect for are things like GFIs and what else? I mean, they're not big value, not
Usually
sure.
not.
I mean, this is a big price tag to potentially put on a use and occupancy certificate, and, realtors might be used to negotiating roof replacements or, but that doesn't prohibit the sale happening.
I think, part of the reason that other municipalities have gone with the certificate of occupancy is that it's hard to think of another practical way to do this. It seems like this is something that we're going to have to do. In other words, if I understand, I was on council when this resolution passed 5 years ago. And if I remember correctly, this is going to be imposed upon us if we don't do it, ultimately. So it isn't something we're going to be able to put off indefinitely. We need to figure out how to do it. And the sale, resale time seems to be, it's definite, and it's not requiring people to, have an inspection like now, or to have their house inspected, every 10 years or whatever. I mean, you might not sell your house for 25 years, and that whole time there could be something going on, but you're not required to deal with it until the house is sold. So I don't know. We worked something out with the college because it's a different situation with the college where you have this sort of periodic every 15 years or whatever the language is.
Well, it's not just
in
the
the
college,
ordinance.
it's all commercial.
Commercial, real estate.
Institutional.
I guess we could try to do something similar with homeowners, but boy, that might be even more onerous. I don't know. So I think, it kind of makes sense on the residential side to pick the point of sale.
And also, that's the time of year we collecting a large amount of money.
That's when there's cash likely to become
Right.
available too.
Where you could shift it to the buyer.
Yeah, and so I don't know, if we don't do it this way, we've got to come up with some other way of doing it, and I'm not sure what it would be.
There's also the issue, I had one resident come to me and tell me that there were two people in his neighborhood who had just bought houses, and they were furious because a month after they bought the house, the sewer line failed. And they were maxed out because the deal was done. They had committed to a mortgage with what they had no extra cash. Whereas before the sale, there's flexibility. There's flexibility for the adjustment on both sides. Before the sale is definitely the time to do it. And these people complained and they said, this is terrible. You buy a house, and then the line collapses, you have no money, and then you're stuck. You know, I did go over to the realtor in town and walked in their office and gave them the ordinance and said, do you see a problem? And within 2 seconds, they said, do this. You should do this.
Yeah.
And there are people who deal with these transactions all the time.
And he also came to the committee meeting.
Yes.
And said that
In
at the
public,
meeting.
yes.
It wasn't just with Ross privately.
Yes.
He told all of us that.
So I understand your concern, but it may be, you may create more problems.
Sorry, David's comment got me thinking about something else as well. What about rental properties? How are they covered in this? Because they don't sell.
Yes, they're commercial properties, they are
They're
covered.
No. If it's no. If someone owns a house and is renting it out and plans to pass it to their children who are going to rent it out for the next
They're the
150
building
years.
owner.
They sell. We actually looked at that. They sell. You mean like the 3 and the 4 unit buildings? They sell.
No, I
Yeah.
mean like single-family houses that have been rented for decades.
I don't think we have any data on that. I mean, I think that house is gonna sell just as much as any other house when you decided that there would be no difference. That those houses sell probably the same frequency as any other house in the borough sells. There aren't that many homes that, I mean, the big rentals do not turn over. The 2 on Chester Road and the Dartmouth House Apartments. But the smaller buildings, I mean, some of them have turned over multiple times since I've been here. So I don't think there would be any difference. I think they would be in the loop as much as any other property.
So would it be worth writing any language into this that, like if there's a property that hasn't turned over in 25 or 30 years or 40 years from when we write this ordinance, that they're required to have an inspection? I mean, do we want to catch all the properties with this?
I don't think we have the administrative capability
Right,
to do
it's
that.
a matter of knowing how to identify that.
When a house is sold?
And there's
Now,
also,
when it hasn't sold, and the house hasn't sold in 50 years, how's it on anybody's radar screen?
there's also an issue, if you make Swarthmore's ordinance really different than the other communities, there's going to be a problem, okay? The realtor said, adopt this. This is being recommended to all communities in the state, okay? It's like going out there. This is an area where you don't want to make it harder to sell your property because you have to hire a lawyer to figure out how your requirement is different than some other community. I mean, it's basically what they do. It's
I don't like that argument. I'm sorry. I feel like you're saying this is how everybody else does it, so we shouldn't try and be more complete or more protective or more thorough. And I hear what you're saying, like you don't want
That's not
to
what I
put
said.
so much detail in that everything has to be litigated. But, I feel like I'm bringing up things that to me could become serious problems. Like just the idea of defining repair, or what does the lateral inspection form look like? I don't, I hear you want to get this done, but I don't like the argument of like, this is what everybody else is doing, so we should do it too.
Well, I don't think he's saying all kids are doing it, let's do it. I get what you're saying, but I think you're kind of making it overly simplistic where we're just saying, everybody did it, let's just do it. That's not what Ross is saying, that's not what the committee is recommending. I think what we're all saying is, we have to do this in some form. We're not going to get away from it. And I think what we're saying is, even though I understand your arguments completely, once you start putting more discretion into something, or what about this exception, and what about this exception, then it sort of swallows the whole thing, and then I think we're left with the very thing that you were worried about, which is what happens to certain people. And I think that those things sort of do have to be addressed, I think, as they come up. And I don't know, I think the more we sort of tweak it to address those things you're concerned about, we're going to end up with, as I said, the very thing that you do not want. And quite frankly, I think when you have the kind of situation where you're going to already say, well, there are going to be people who cannot afford this or cannot do this, I think we're already opening ourselves up to those very arguments. Sort of like what we did with the sidewalk repair. For every person who came in and said, you know, this is a hardship, and there weren't that many who said this is a hardship, you're making me fix my sidewalk. We had a lot of elderly people in the Aging in Place Committee who said, I can't walk at night. I can't, you know, I have friends of mine who have fallen, not once but several times, on the sidewalks in this town. So I didn't feel like it was a hardship to say to people, get your sidewalk fixed. To me, this is, I realize this is a lot more money, but it's sort of like that. This is really something you have to do, because don't lose sight of the fact that where we started this conversation was, this is about polluting the waterways. Like we do have to care about that too. So it's really a balance. But I just want to make sure everybody here understands that it's not personal, but we did work on this for quite a while. I just want to make sure everybody understands, including the people who are out there, that a lot of thought went into this. That's all.
I do have a definition, because I have so many ordinances roughly in front of me. I have definitions for repair and replacement. I'm not sure how it would help this particular ordinance, but we could put them in. What repair means the physical exposure of a section of pipe or appurtenances and for the purposes of resuming proper operating condition. Replacement shall mean removal and replacement of existing pipe or appurtenances. So maybe it would clarify that sometimes repair, as defined here, is
What was
okay.
repair again?
Repair is physical explosion of a section of pipe and or appurtenances and for the purpose of resuming proper operating condition. So that would clarify that there are times when an inspector could say it's just a section of pipe that needs to be repaired.
But that doesn't address the root issue, where repair could just be cleaning out, roto-rooting the pipe. I like the definition of repair. I think that does clarify it. But it still leaves you digging up your pipe if you've got 25% root blockage.
I think any inspector who sees that you've taken the roots out and have been able to get the line clear, and the line is then that you have to re-inspect the line after you do that, because you often will have a new break.
We would hope so, but
Yeah.
the way it's written now, if your definition, I mean, okay, so this is maybe what Mary's saying. I'm overcomplicating. If we don't define repair, then repair can be roto-rooting the line, as long as the water's flowing again.
And you're saying it should be more, that you need to do more than roto-rooter?
No, I think you can, if you have roots in your line, you can roto-rooter and get a clear line. I mean, I think if you have roots in your line, you have a crack in the joint. So that's a different issue. But this is specifically, this isn't saying anything about cracks in the joint. This is saying if you have roots.
Right, but I mean, if 25% or greater of the lateral cross-sectional area is blocked by debris, any kind of debris, including tree roots, then the debris had to get in there somehow.
Right.
So it could be dirt, that would be debris, I guess. It could be broken masonry or cast iron or something. It could be tree roots, but you had to get there somehow. 25%, that's quite a bit. It's not just a little bit.
Well, is that 25% of the line or 25%
Of the
of
lateral
the
cross-sectional area. Yeah, so that means if the pipe is this big, 25%.
in any section?
In any section.
So even if it's a
Yep.
quarter of an inch thick,
Yep.
it's 20. So, again, you're changing, so again, back to anybody, everyone in Swarthmore who sells their house will have to have some section dug up.
Right.
Because everybody's got roots in their lines, or
That's
cracks.
not true. That is not true.
That's not.
Well,
The borough, we can televise so much section of the borough line and not hit roots. You'll hit finger roots coming in, but to be blocking 25%, you're going to have seen an effect of that. You're going to have had a minor cave-in, or it's going to be backing up in your house. It's not, that's not every house in Swarthmore by any means. You can have a clear line all the way out there, or you can have had it roto-rooted, and maybe it didn't come back. Maybe for whatever reason, but I don't think the intent of this ordinance is to do anything other than what Ross said, which is to identify areas of influent infiltration that are polluting the waterways. I don't think it's in any way a backhanded effort to say we're gonna have every line fixed in Swarthmore. I just don't, I didn't even, to me personally, in reviewing this with the community, it never even occurred to me that everybody's line was gonna be blocked, because we haven't seen that.
And
And neither has anyone, let me just finish real quick, hold on one second. In talking to Nether and these other, or in many other places, they're not seeing that either. In fact, most inspections are not resulting in replacement of the, or even repair of the laterals. Most of them are kind of okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think we would be any different than that, because that list that Ross read is pretty old communities, pretty similar to us in terms of age, and some people have already replaced their lines. So I don't think that was the intent, and I don't think that's going to be the result.
There's also, you know, when we asked Nether to come in and share their experience with us, it was for exactly the reasons that you're raising. If we wanted to hear what the problems would be, we wanted to hear with an experienced manager who's already gone through this process. We wanted to anticipate the problems. One thing we did, you know, we talked with them about making C the list of cracks, fractures, or whatever. We made some alterations in that to make it not so draconian, such that it would be what you're saying. We changed it so that it wouldn't be what you're saying, that everything automatically had to fail. One thing Dave Grady said was that there's also an issue that we're doing it in order to make sure that we don't have infiltration and inflow, and we don't have leakage and contamination. But we're also doing this because Delcora, who you know, Susan Smythe is our representative with Delcora. We authorized a payment of $186,000 and change tonight to them. We are in that. We have no choice. We are in that. We have to get rid of our waste, and it's through that authority. So one thing Dave Grady said was he actually questioned in our discussions whether if you make too many changes to the ordinance that Delcora has recommended, will they come back and say we're not complying?
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Like, we better do it the way they want it, or they will come back and sort of take it over from us and say, no, you have to do our ordinance, or they will fine the borough.
Yeah, I've looked at the consent order. Delcora has to go back, and they have to prove to the DEP and the EPA and the Justice Department that they're complying with a court order. They're under time constraints. So we haven't gone overboard with that, but we're also respectful of the fact that we have partners we're working with in this. This is not just Swarthmore. We have partners that we're working with in this, and they're partners that we are relying on to comply with our statutory requirements for sewage act. We don't have our own borough sewage facility. This isn't a go it alone thing. We're in it with a team, and the team is saying this is what we all need to do. So we're trying to get with the team.
I'm just wondering, kind of procedurally, given all the discussion we've been having, and it seems like there may or may not be some tweaks to the language. Is it premature to advertise, or can we go ahead and advertise it as is, you know, and continue to tweak it?
I think, to my understanding, there's one provision that has been put on the table tonight that I think was not objected to.
Right.
There is a motion on the table to advertise?
Yes.
There is.
There is.
And a second.
And a second.
So I think you vote on that motion.
Okay, all right.
And it can be tweaked in between now.
Yeah, that's really my question. My question is not that, let's say we vote and it passes and it's advertised. We're still able to tweak the language between that and passage. Right?
Yeah, if I think the the word is material changes are made in the
Okay.
borough code, if they use the word material, you have to re-advertise.
You have to re-advertise it.
I kind of judge that by, is it imposing greater burdens on the residents than in its current state?
Got it.
That's kind of my threshold for what material is.
All right.
So,
If it actually
if it lessens.
doesn't impose or lessens.
Right, if it
wouldn't
kind of
be-
clarifies,
Yeah,
but
right.
yeah, it would not
It would
require
not be.
second advertising, in my opinion.
Okay.
And the revision is section 6C,
Yes.
Yes.
and possibly the addition of some sort of arbitration or dispute process?
That would have to be considered by the committee.
Yeah, I think that's,
That's a major
that would be a,
change.
We would know that is at this point.
Would that be a major change?
well, I think that would even require some research to figure out like how, who would do it. And, yeah, well, I mean, for example, where would you go for the
Yeah.
arbitration or the,
And this is,
you know,
the borough has a appeal board for construction code disputes. And this ordinance says
yes.
it's not an absolute appeal, meaning, but in section 7B,
Yep.
it says that repairs or replacements necessary to correct defects shall be conform to the standards of the Pennsylvania Uniform Commercial Construction Code. Sorry. And residents can appeal. They can file appeals under the Uniform Construction Code to the Borough Construction Code Appeals Board, which has probably never met. Is that right?
Once.
Once, yeah. It doesn't, they don't meet often. But there is an appeal board. If you thought you were being forced to do a repair or a replacement that was excessive or not required by code, or there were a different way to do it, you could appeal to that body.
And then where would it go after that if the person wasn't satisfied
Court
with
of
that
Common
decision?
Pleas.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, what about those definitions?
You mean the definition of repair
Yeah,
and
right.
replacement? It seems to me they're just kind of common sense dictionary type definitions,
Yeah.
which they don't necessarily add anything, but they don't, you know, they don't materially change it.
I'm more concerned with that, with the roots thing, that, you know, we could give people the option of cleaning out the line instead of, unless that would be considered a repair.
But I think the solicitor's point was if you're 25, if that much of your line is blocked with debris, there's something, I mean, the roots are getting in somewhere. So
Or-
once
or-
you see
or-
that level, and that's pretty standard language. What they're saying is that's indicative of a problem that needs to be fixed. Those roots didn't just that's how they got in there. So even if you clean them, all you've done is.
Let's just stop for a second. Think about it for a second. D, okay, 6D. So that's a defect. 25% or greater of the lateral cross section. That's a defect. Section 7. Repairs or replacements, this is B, necessary to correct any defects. Well, if the only defect is there are roots in there that are somehow mysteriously there, and there's no other defect in the pipe, then cutting out the roots would repair the defect, and that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only if, you see what I'm saying? I mean, if you
No,
read
because
the
that's
two.
exactly the
if you read
situation
the
that I
two
was
to-
in.
If
We
you read
had-
the two together.
It was like
that would take care
85%
of
block.
it. It's only if you clean out the roots and the camera
Then finds
finds
crack.
that, oh my God, the roots are there because there's this crack that they
Right.
were coming.
But apparently what the plumber led me to believe is that once a root, like the roots can kind of grow in your sewer line
They can.
on, like if one
They
little
can.
root gets in, it can grow to be a whole clog, even though it's like one little tendril coming in through.
Well, the camera will reveal that. And, you know,
Okay.
in other words, when you cut the roots out, you have your camera, it's going to see whether, like you say, one little thing kind of wormed its way in there, or there's a hole.
So if you're able to clear the blockage and there's no obvious defects at that point, then
It
that would be the
says
repair.
necessary to correct any defects found. And if the only defect is the presence
Debris.
of roots
Or debris.
or debris, but, you know, I think what this ordinance is contemplating that if there's that much debris or roots, then, there could be something else. But the camera will tell you. If the camera says, no, somehow it's in there, but there's no crack or hole, okay? It would be repaired if you got rid of it.
And does the lateral inspection form exist, or is that in progress?
That, the committee decided that the inspection form would be done after any of the ordinance was adopted, because it's not at the level of the ordinance.
I have some samples. I think I have another sample. I was just looking up on my phone. Darby Township has had this since 2012. And I don't know what they're using for a form. We can collect them from, I don't know if they're all using the same form or not. I have no idea.
Because some of this that I'm asking could be answered by what's in that lateral inspection form, right? I mean, that could define what it requires.
I'll make sure that you get a copy of it and you can decide that.
Right. Is that common to pass the ordinance before the required form is determined or written?
I mean, the form shouldn't be policy. The ordinance is policy. The form should be an administrative thing that council never comes before council. It's not going to be legislative or.
Well, all right, I'm going to bring this discussion to a close for tonight. We have a motion to authorize advertisement of this draft ordinance, and we have a second. And I'm going to put it to a vote. All in favor of advertising this draft ordinance, say aye.
With that one change?
With that one change.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So we have,
Yes.
right, so the ayes have it, and we will advertise the draft ordinance.
Okay. That's all I have for the committee.
Actually, there's a resolution on that.
Oh, okay.
I got one more thing.
So we have resolution number 2018-06 to dispose of the old pickup truck. So this is the truck that we were afraid to get, that the back that holds the dirt would come forward and come into the cab, and we needed to replace it. And we did replace it, and now the old one, we were able to find a way to sell the used truck to recoup some of that money. So I think this resolution was circulated.
Yes, it was.
And so I will move to pass resolution 2018-06.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adopting resolution number 2018-06, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The resolution is adopted. Thanks, Ross. Our mayor is not here this evening. Jane?
I don't think I have anything else. I mentioned in the recycling report, it was a little strange that the recycling center is down. We can correct that. I think I mentioned the recycling meetings, working with EAC in a few steps, set the underpass. The only other thing I will mention quickly is the borough did get a grant about 3 years ago. It has to be completed by the end of this year. It's a Department of Environmental Protection grant, and it is to daylight a stream at the Swarthmore Swim Club. It's currently in a concrete channel and underground to provide a little wetland area and to naturalize the stream. This would help the borough in its requirements for stormwater management. So we're hoping, we've been working with the swim club trying to get a final plan that will work for the swim club as well. And the swim club board just approved the plan that was done. So hopefully we'll be bringing that to closure and then finding a grant to get the work done.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jane. Well,
Thanks, I don't have anything to report.
motion to adjourn into executive session?
So
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.